Now, without further delay, I'm pleased to introduce our guest speakers, Emily Grossman and Jennifer Marshall. Emily, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Aubrey. And thanks to all of you who are here today. I wish I was in the room with all of you. There's many, many who are joining, and it's thrilling to be here. Before Jen and I get started, I wanted to really thank the wonderful people at NAMI New York City for having Jen and I here to do this important presentation. I also really want to thank personally my partner, Caesar, who so lovingly said that this would be fine for me to share and give a window into what it's like to date someone who lives with a mental health diagnosis. And I also really want to thank, and I'm so grateful to my partner for this presentation, Jennifer Marshall, who's going to introduce herself in just about a half hour after I share my part. So the way we're going to work tonight is that we're going to ask that if you have questions, please put them in the chat. And we're not going to take questions during the presentation, just so that we can cover the whole presentation. But afterwards, Aubrey and Barbara are going to be coordinating all the questions, and we'll hopefully get to as many of them as possible. We're going to leave a full half hour for your important questions because we really want to answer your burning questions about romance and mental health diagnoses. So the name of this presentation was Healthy Romance and a Mental Health Diagnosis. Can they coexist? And spoiler alert, they absolutely can. And so I'm going to share my screen now so that you can see my slides. And I think we have hit upon a topic that people really want to talk about. And my whole desire with this presentation, and I know I speak for Jen as well, and I don't like to speak for people, but is really if we can touch your heart and give you hope that you can have a healthy romantic relationship, even if you are a person even and sometimes because you are a person living with a mental health diagnosis, then I feel like we have done our job at the end of this. So please know that we're here to give you as much hope as possible, especially from my standpoint, because I was not given hope when I was first diagnosed. So I'm going to get started and tell you a little bit about myself. And before I do, let me just make sure the slides are working. Yes? Okay. So before I tell you a little bit more about myself and my own journey, I want to share two quotes with you. One is when I was a young girl, I was at Epcot and I saw this sign, if we can dream it, we can do it. And I dreamed from probably the time I was that age, maybe 8 or 9, about having a partner, about having love in my life. It was always a dream of mine. And so I want to encourage all of you that if it's a dream of yours, it can happen. And to give you further hope, I'm not sure who said this. The other one was Walt Disney. This one I Googled too, but couldn't find the author. So if you know them, let us know. One day you'll look at the love of your life and believe in miracles. And that's how I get to feel every day. And I feel so, so grateful about that. And I know it is possible for all of us living with mental health diagnoses. So just a little bit about me and my journey. So this is a series of 3 pictures of me at different parts of the journey. Just so you know how I qualify as a person living with a mental health diagnosis, I was diagnosed at age 18 with bipolar 2 disorder and started a series of hospitalizations that led to about 12 psychiatric hospitalizations and nearly being placed in a state hospital with no end date in mind because of how severe bipolar 2 disorder was. I experienced depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, psychosis, mania. So I had a full array of mental health symptoms. And I was able to, through a lot of different methods that I'll talk about in a few minutes, come to a place of recovery. And it wasn't just a one-off. So the second picture was my early recovery days when I graduated with a master's degree from Columbia University in education. And that was just the beginning of my recovery journey. I think what really helped me, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, was both that I followed through with treatment, of course, but also when I was in graduate school, fortuitously, I found a meditation practice in addition to the medication and therapy and DBT and so many other things that really created this perfect storm to help me to kick off my recovery journey. That said, after a bit, then I had a relapse with depression and then started to find my passion in life, which was actually started through NAMI in Our Own Voice. For those of you who know of that program, I started speaking about my own recovery journey, and I became trained as a mental health peer provider, and then got into training mental health professionals on mental health recovery. And that's what I do today. I am both a trainer. I work for Rutgers in their psychiatric rehabilitation department, which is a wonderful department that really is the study of how people with mental health diagnoses and conditions can get well. And I also have a private peer life coaching practice where I get to coach people all the time on their recovery journeys. So that's a little bit about, and I have come to what I consider a place of full recovery, meaning that for the last 15 years, I have not had the symptoms of mania, depression, or psychosis. I do still at times experience anxiety, and I have had normal ups and downs in life, but I have not been hospitalized in 15 years either. So that's a little bit about my background, but in all of this, I was searching for a happy, healthy relationship. And I remember when I first raised this with my treatment team, I was 18 years old. And I was really determined to find a healthy, happy partnership. And they said the standard thing that I've heard many people say, which is work on yourself first. Don't worry about relationships. Think about yourself and your recovery. And that was a hard thing to hear because part of my despair and my struggles surrounded the idea that I wasn't sure I was ever going to find a life partner. So knowing that that is a goal, I want to say right up front, is okay. I give you all permission to have the goal, even if your providers are not saying that. And to providers who are on here, I really encourage you to incorporate this goal in the treatment plan for anyone you're working with, because this is such, as humans, we want to connect and love and be loved. It's a natural goal, and it's okay to have that goal, and it's an important goal. So moving on in my own journey, I wanted to talk a little bit about dating before recovery. So when I was not recovered, I had one healthy relationship in high school, and I had some others that were not so healthy, but not terrible. And then I was unfortunately, in my college years, I was in an unhealthy and emotionally and sometimes physically abusive relationship that went on and off for many, many years. Even though we officially ended the relationship, it was still kind of on and off for many years after. So a lot of trauma in that aspect of my life. And because of that trauma, I really pulled away from dating for quite some time. Or I was dating on and off, but I wasn't really serious about it. And I was plagued by a lot of low self-esteem. I also had this idea that I wanted to be saved. I wanted someone to come along and save me from my mental health condition. And that was a very unhealthy idea. And I was looking for happiness outside of myself in a relationship, as opposed to knowing that no one can make you happy. We are all responsible for our own happiness. So if you remember nothing else from my part of the presentation, a partner is not there to make you happy. You have to make yourself happy. So that said, partnership can be a wonderful experience. So I found that I was, before recovery, I was really stuck. I was not in a serious relationship from the time I was 23 for about 20 years. And I was dating on and off. I was on online dating sites. I was getting set up by different people. But I was not getting too far. And part of it, in one of my relapses, I was put on a medication that really stimulated an eating disorder and caused me to gain 100 pounds in 6 months. And so that also fed into my very unhealthy sense of self-worth and my ideas about dating. And so that's a little bit about what unhealthy dating was like. Um, Also, like I said, I had the wrong ideas about what a partner should look like in my life. But then I dug in and started to do, quote unquote, the work. So what did that look like for me? It looked like getting serious about dialectical behavior therapy and using coping strategies and skills to learn how to regulate and manage my own emotions, as opposed to making someone else responsible for how I was feeling or my emotions at any given time. And that's been a lifelong pursuit and always a work in progress. In addition, like I said, I found a spiritual practice, and I'm not here to say that anyone's spiritual practice is the right one. I happened to find a spiritual practice that made sense to me, that involved daily meditation. And I do meditate for about a half hour each morning now. I didn't always. I've really worked on creating structures and healthy coping mechanisms, and that is an important one for me. I got into a 12-step program for compulsive overeating and food addiction, and I was able to lose 75 of the 100 pounds that I gained. And I didn't show a picture of myself as my 75 pounds heavier, but you can use your imagination there. And then I started to work on the trauma as well, the trauma of a previous relationship, because someone said to me once, if you, let me think of how the saying goes, if you don't heal what hurt you, you're going to bleed on somebody that didn't cut you. I'll say that one more time. If you don't heal what hurt you, you're going to bleed on somebody that didn't cut you. And I did not want to metaphorically bleed on my next partner. I wanted to be healed in terms of the trauma so that I wouldn't take it out on the next person and potentially sabotage something that was really, really good. So I did the trauma work through something called cognitive processing therapy. And I won't get too into that because that could get us into the weeds, but it's a way of reframing trauma and telling yourself a different story about it. And I worked very hard on that type of therapy for about a year to overcome some of the trauma I was experiencing so that I was getting myself ready for dating again. And all of this evolved over a 20-year period. And I'm not saying that it's going to take you 20 years to find your the person that you're meant to be with, your soulmate, your person, however you want to refer to it. But for me, I needed to grow and heal and change. So, what did healthy dating look like for me? So, I changed the way I was looking at dating when I started in a more healthy dating pattern. Instead of looking for this firework chemistry right away, which I do have with the person that is my partner now, I was looking for something different. I was looking for kindness as my number one goal with the person and their number one quality. And I had to really shift that because I thought that that was, you see in movies that like the fireworks go off and they look across each other at a room. And I'm not saying that I didn't love meeting my partner for the first time. It was wonderful. But I am saying that I was looking at his qualities and characteristics, not just for fireworks to go off immediately. And so really thinking about, I wanted to be with someone who was kind. And I used to have a very long laundry list of other things, but I was not looking for kindness right away. And so that really had to shift. Um, I improved my own self-image and really started meditating on the idea that I have, and I'm spiritual, so I will say I have the spark of whatever higher force you believe in. I believe it's also inside of me, and I had to come to a place through my meditation where I really believe that spark of whatever we believe in is inside of me. And if you don't believe in that, that's okay too. But that was my journey. Um, then I wanted to touch upon disclosure and how I handle disclosure. I am someone who has spoken publicly about my mental health diagnosis and recovery for many, many years. And so I am Googleable. As soon as you know my last name, you can Google me and find out a lot of information. And I've written for Huffington Post on recovery. Post all over social media about recovery. And I'm only saying that to say that I'm highly Googleable. And so when the way I decided to handle that with men was that I stopped telling them my last name right away. And that was a choice I made because I had tried all different kinds of things. I tried putting my mental health diagnosis on a profile. I tried telling people immediately on a first date. I really wanted to be transparent and be proud of it. And I really am proud of how far I've come. But I realized after a while that I wanted someone to know who I am right now and the full me, and not just pigeonhole me into one part of myself. And so I learned to not lead with my mental health diagnosis, not because it's a bad thing or something I'm ashamed of, but because it's only a small sliver of who Emily Grossman is, if that makes sense. So that became a little more complicated because in October of 2023, I wrote a book called Unlocked from Psych Hospital to Higher Self, where I talk about the 25 keys to recovering from depression, bipolar disorder, and anxiety. And so I was really Googleable at that point and with a very provocative topic that indicated that I had been in a psychiatric hospital. And so when I first met my partner, Caesar, the way I decided to handle it was I waited a few dates where we met on a dating app. And I waited a few dates where we were just talking on the app because I knew as soon as I gave him my phone number, he would have my last name and Google me. Now, it turns out he didn't even think of Googling me. So I don't want you all to worry if you are out there talking that someone is definitely going to, but I just wanted to cover all of my bases. But on my third date with him, I really made a conscious decision after he knew other things about me to tell him about my mental health and my journey. But I kept an arc of positivity. I kept it focused on all of the ways that I've recovered and how proud I feel of my recovery and my mission to really help others to not just recover, but live their best lives. And so once I did that, he decided, and we kind of discussed it and decided together. First of all, he was totally supportive and totally respectful and really admired me for my journey. Um, and at that point, he really wanted to read the book. And even though we were new in getting to know each other, I felt safe enough with him. And I figured, this is me, this is who I am, that I did say, okay, read the book. And I remember the date where I really knew that this was going to have long-lasting potential was we sat at a restaurant and he asked the most insightful, wonderful questions about the book and my journey. And I didn't feel judged. I just felt loved. And so from there, our relationship really took off. So what can I tell you about Caesar and Bets? He and I in Arizona. My parents who are here live in Arizona. So hi, Mom and Dad. Anyway, so I feel like he is good for my nervous system. There were so many times where a man kept me guessing and I didn't know where I stood with them. And so my nervous system was all over the place. I was anxious, I was stressed, I was thinking, I was ruminating. And that is the opposite of how I felt and feel with Caesar. He is good for my nervous system. I feel happiness and wonderful, but I feel this sense of peace and security and safety with him because he's always let me know where I stand from the very beginning. And he's always been clear about his intentions, not just in his words, but in his actions. I feel like I have a teammate that will go the distance. We have shared morals and values, not all of the same interests, but our hearts and our values and morals are the same. And that makes it wonderful. And for example, he loves sports. I was not a sports fan before I met him, but now let's go Knicks is all I have to say. They're playing tonight, just FYI. So yeah, so I've learned so much from him and he's learned about my interests, and that learning from each other is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I know we always hear no games, no drama, but really, I don't feel the games with him. He's very clear about who he is and what his intentions are for me. And I'm just doing a quick time check. Okay, so one of the things I want to emphasize is that we both grow as individuals in addition to growing together. So I've had to work at balancing all of the habits that I developed before I met him for health. Journaling, meditation, exercise, spirituality, all of the different ways that I maintain and am very strict with myself about recovery are things I still work on every day, and I balance them out for the most part. It's harder when you have a partner in your life, but I haven't let those things go. When we communicate, we are on the same team. It's not, I'm going to point a finger and try to win an argument. It's not about winning. It's about understanding each other. On my end, I really look out for impulsivity. I have this thing where if I feel an intense emotion, I want to get rid of it, even if that means blurting out my feelings. And I've learned to take a step back and watch for that quality in myself because I don't want to hurt him. And I don't want to be defensive when he brings me something that we have to work on together. And he is not defensive. When I am vulnerable with him, which I am very often, and he with me, I feel safe to be that way. I'm not feeling judged, as evidenced by the fact that he read a book about my mental health journey and didn't judge. And I feel the same about him. I talked about learning from each other, and I talked about, but I have to say it one more time, I don't look to him and he doesn't look to me we don't look to each other for happiness. We look to each other for love and support, but I am responsible and the manager of my own emotions, and he is responsible for his own emotions, and I don't ask him to manage mine, and vice versa. And we are happy and we enjoy a lot of happiness together, but he's not the one who makes me happy. I think that's a common myth that we hear. So in the last few minutes of my half hour before I turn things over to Jen, who has an incredible story too, and a really encouraging story, I want to share this quote. If you genuinely love someone, then through your relationship, you can develop into a person whose love extends to all humanity. So what that means to me, and this is by Daisaku Ikeda, who's a philosopher and a spiritual leader of sorts. Um, so what this means to me really is that our love makes me want to be a better version of myself. And has said the same thing. And the more of us who are collectively working on becoming a better version of ourselves, the more I believe our society gets better. Because when you are feeling at your best, you treat the next person better, who treats the next person better. So I just want to say I am so committed to this message of hope, because I really believe that love is what fuels all of the good things in the world. And so I want more and more of us to fall in love, and also to love ourselves. So I want to leave it there, and thank you so much for allowing me to share my part of this story. I'm now going to turn it over to Jen, who's going to talk about marriage. Jen, take it away.
Thanks so much, Emily. That was a wonderful presentation. I always love hearing your story. Um, I am also so grateful to NAMI New York City for hosting us tonight. Uh, I'm super excited to share my story with you all. So let me get my slides up here. Let's see if I can do this. We practiced. So, okay, here we go. It says replace current share. I think I got it. Okay, I think we might be good here. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Jen Marshall, and I am super excited to be here tonight. I live in Ashburn, Virginia, which is about 35 minutes outside Washington, D.C., and we've lived here about 17 years with our family. So in these photos, you see there's my husband, Ben, and our two kids. We have Vivian, who's 14 now, and Owen, who is 16 and is about to get his driver's license, so send help. But I'd love to jump in and start with a question for everyone. And it's a basic question. What if I told you that despite living with a lifelong mental health condition, it is possible to build a relationship filled with understanding, joy, and growth? And I feel like I'm a living example of that. So I'm so grateful to be able to share my story. So my journey with love and how it intersects with mental health starts back when I was in college. So Ben and I met, we were 18 years old when we met as freshmen in college. I went to James Madison University in Virginia, and he went to Virginia Tech, which was about 2 hours away. And we were introduced by a mutual friend. And quickly, there were a lot of sparks, but we didn't start dating seriously until the next year, our sophomore year. Started dating seriously and exclusively, and we would visit each other at each other's schools every other weekend. And we fell in love. And after college, we moved to the DC metro area where his family was and where there were a lot of job opportunities. And he was hired right away as an engineer, and I started looking for my first job. After a couple of jobs, I fell into what would become my first career, which was recruiting. I was a creative recruiter for an agency in DC, and I thrived at it. Over 4 years, I became the top grossing recruiter in the company. And with it, though, there was a lot of stress and a lot of intensity. And that was the time in my life where my mental illness broke through the surface of my life. At 26 years old, I suffered two manic episodes 2 weeks apart that both required psychiatric hospitalizations. Um, we were, blown away because we had never dealt with any kind of mental health challenge, either of us, in our lives. So it was a learning curve, and we quickly tried to get up to speed on everything we could. So we would, look for information everywhere we could. My family got me in to see really good doctors, and thankfully, within a couple months, I was properly diagnosed with type 1 bipolar disorder. A lot of people go years without reaching a proper diagnosis, and I was just very, very lucky. And so with that diagnosis came a plan, and started trying different medications, went to therapy, had psychiatrist appointments every week. Um, I took a step back from my job and ended up having to resign from that job to focus on getting well. And with that, it threw me into a clinical depression. So I dealt with suicidal thoughts, and it was a very, very difficult time in my life. And Ben, as my loving partner, was just so supportive and would encourage me as best he could. He would cook for me when I couldn't eat, and he would just do everything he could to remind me that we were going to get through this. Um, Luckily, I had a medicine change. It worked. It turned out to be the medicine I continue to take today, and that helps me through it. And then I was stable for a year, and we decided we wanted to start our family. And during the years, unfortunately, that I was having my children, both times I experienced psychosis. So I had postpartum psychosis after my son was born, and I had antenatal psychosis, which is during pregnancy with my daughter's pregnancy. Um, we got through all of that and grew significantly as a couple, and thankfully grew together. But it didn't come without its challenges, which are some of the things I'm going to talk about as we go along here. Um, we got through that, but then comes a really amazing part of my story. Um, I started writing when my kids were about 3 and 1, and I started writing on a blog that I called Bipolar Mom Life. And I wrote about how I was finally successfully managing this lifelong mental health condition. And I wanted to break the stigma because we should be able to talk about it. And I wrote about love too. I wrote about how our marriage survives mental illness. And I blogged for a while, and an editor found my writing, published me, and I had a paid writing job. And then I had the opportunity to give other people that same platform where a wider audience could hear their stories. And I created an organization called This Is My Brave, which is a mental health storytelling organization that we turned into a nonprofit. And I ran that nonprofit for 10 years before we came to the conclusion that we had reached our mission. We, over the 10 years, featured 120 shows across the United States, featuring like 1,300 people telling their story. Emily told her story in the New York City show. As she mentioned, being Googleable. All of our shows are on YouTube. So we reached the point where the research team had studied our program, that they deemed it an evidence-based program, and we offered it to anyone who wants to create a show. So our organization closed at the end of last year, and I found my next opportunity where I'm now the executive director of a wellness center here in Ashburn. Um, and that's kind of a little bit about my overall journey with bipolar disorder. And we'll go into a little bit more detail as we go through here. Um, I truly believe that anything worth having is worth fighting for, and that includes love and relationships. So I have a question for the audience, if you would put it in the chat. And I have my presentation up, so I can't see the chat, but I'll go back to it. What's one thing that you believe is essential for a healthy relationship? And as I continue to share my experience with you tonight, I think my answer to this question is going to become obvious, but my answer is teamwork. So I believe that, with hard work and intention, long-lasting love is not only possible, but it will be the outcome. So some of the unique challenges and lessons learned through Ben and I have been married now almost 22 years and living with mental illness practically the majority of that 20 years. I've lived with bipolar disorder, and he's lived with it with me. And some of the unique challenges are mood swings. As we know, bipolar, you have the highs and you have the lows, and navigating mood swings and their impact on relationships, plus us women have the added benefit of perimenopause and menopause on top of that. Um, for me, one of the biggest challenges was realizing that my moods, whether highs or lows, didn't just affect me, but they impacted my partner too. It took time for both of us to realize that my mood swings weren't personal attacks or emotional instability directed at him. They were symptoms. And that was a big distinction. We learned to separate me from the mood. So that was something that I think is important to remember as you go through this. Um, Managing communication also during those high and low episodes, we had to work hard on communication. When I'm in a depressive episode, it's hard for me to express what I need or even talk at times. Then during hypomania or mania, sometimes I talk too much or I get irritable. So we created like a simple check-in system where it's a 1 or 2 word phrase that we can connect with each other and realize that we really need to make time for communication. Um, okay, and then stigma is another thing to keep in mind. We at times had to address stigma. A lot of times it was my own self stigma, but stigma can show up in small ways like assumptions, fears, or feeling isolated. And we learned that open, honest conversations were the best way to keep these misunderstandings from growing. So over time, we became a team against the illness, not against each other. And that goes back to what I said before, teamwork. Lessons and strategies that I learned were the importance of radical self-awareness and owning your mental health journey. And really, one of the biggest game changers for me was realizing that no one could do the work for me. I was in charge of being radically honest with myself about how my mental health shows up, my mood, the bad, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And the more I took ownership of my journey, my diagnosis and my treatment, and my self-care, the stronger and healthier our relationship became. So making a commitment to the things that keep you healthy and advocating for yourself or allowing your partner to when you need help, that was critically important for our relationship. Also, communicating openly about triggers, needs, and boundaries. Triggers for me, one trigger I have, which I don't, it's maybe kind of weird, but loud noises are very triggering to me. So I made it a priority to talk openly about things that could set me off and what I needed when I was struggling and where I needed boundaries, not just for myself, but for us as a couple. And it wasn't always easy, but being upfront prevented confusion and resentment later on. So communication is key. And then also recognizing when professional support would help strengthen our partnership. So we learned that getting outside help, whether it was individual therapy or couples therapy or working with my doctor to adjust my medications, that wasn't a sign we were failing. It was a sign that we were investing in our relationship. Therapy gave us the tools that we didn't have before, and medication helped to stabilize things so that we could actually enjoy our time together instead of just surviving. And then I have some ideas on what I call pillars of a thriving relationship, which are mutual understanding and support, commitment to stability, celebrating the good, and some practical tools. So we'll go through all of these. So mutual understanding and support. My recommendation in a marriage, and say you've been married and then bam, mental illness hits out of the blue like it did for us. educate yourselves. So whether it be you educating your partner or seeking out information individually and then coming together. Another crucial tool is to journal your thoughts and feelings um, during or after episodes, and then taking the time between episodes to come together and read through those things together and learn how you can better support each other. That is one thing that helped us a lot. And I guess for me, because I was a writer, it kind of came natural, but anyone can start a journal practice, and it really um, it builds your relationship and makes it that so much stronger. Okay, and then commitment to stability. So for me, the role of therapy and self-care and shared goals helped us stay strong together. So I say do what you need to stay stable. And ideally, some of these things are things you can do together. So for Ben and I, we have an incredible neighborhood that has these walking paths through the woods and through, just the different neighborhoods that are all kind of connected here. And we love to go on long walks together, which helps get you in nature, and it's very therapeutic. Cooking meals together, it's something that you have to do every day anyway, so make it fun. And then couples therapy again is always a good thing. Um, Celebrating the good. I feel like we sometimes overlook the strength we have and the milestones we accomplish. And so I think it's really important to stop and celebrate when you can find strength and joy within each other and appreciate that. And a personal example of this for me is Ben and I would host a Christmas karaoke party every year at our house with all our friends. And we did this for like 6 years, and then COVID hit. So we skipped COVID year. And then in 2021, we were going to bring it back. But my mental health was actually not in a good place at the very end of 2021. And we had to make the decision to cancel the party at the very last minute, which was devastating and so disappointing. But everyone understood. And I took some time to really get healthy and stable and focus on myself. And we, worked together. And then we together made the decision to bring the karaoke party back. And we did it last Christmas, and it had all our friends in and their kids come. And it was such an amazing night. And for Ben and I, it was really a time to celebrate my stability and how far I had come. So it was really special. So I encourage you to do that. And then practical tools that have helped me and helped us in our relationship and navigating this mental health condition and love is things like a mood chart. So with those of us with bipolar disorder know how important it is to chart your mood. So I think we're going to share a link in the chat, but this is one chart that I found online that I really, really like, that helps you understand where you are, and you can actually see it go up and down if you have that instability. So for me, I keep my mood chart that I'm using in the kitchen front and center. The kids can see it, Ben can see it, they can check it at any time, and it gives us a baseline of where I am. So it's really helpful to keep everyone on the same page. Medication and reminder apps. For me, I'm on an iPhone, so I use the health app on my iPhone to remind me, pop up on my medications, which I think is super helpful. Especially on those busy times. And then a pill organizer, I'm sure you guys have seen these, but the day and night ones. I didn't use one for years. I used one when I first got diagnosed and then didn't use one. Now I'm back to it, and I really like it because it shows you when you're running low on a certain medication to call in the prescription or call your doctor to get a refill. So I highly recommend those. And then last but not least is a RAP plan. If you're not familiar with RAP, it stands for Wellness Recovery Action Plan. And Ben and I worked together on this where I filled in, you can use a template where you talk about how you are when you're well, then how you are when you're, symptomatic, the medications you're currently taking, and your treatment plan preference, hospital preference if you had to be hospitalized. It's very, very useful in a crisis situation. And I think it's great to have everyone on the same page. You list all your support people, including your partner, and I highly recommend that as well. And then just some closing thoughts. Remember that your condition doesn't define your ability to love or be loved. Really like taking the effort and understanding and kindness you bring to yourself in the relationship, focus on that. Um, and I would challenge the audience to type in the chat again, maybe 1 to 3 qualities that you feel that you bring to a partnership, because, we all bring unique things to the table when we're talking about a romantic relationship, and you have those qualities in you and you should be proud of them, despite your mental health condition. So remember that. And lastly, I have a quick little story about Ben and I when we went through a lot. I've actually been hospitalized 5 times for my condition. And after the last hospitalization, I remember um, it was a couple years after the last hospitalization when I went through another, you know, low. And I remember crying, holding on to him, hugging him, saying, "Why do you stay with me after all of this?" And he said, very simply, "Because I love you and I knew you were going to get better." And it was because of our relationship and because of our dedication to each other that we were able to get through it. And remember, you'll have good days in your relationship, you'll have bad days. It's a matter of remembering that the bad days won't last forever, and together you can get through them. Um, I believe that there is love that survives mental illness and that we're living proof. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story.